I was halfway through sweeping the front porch when I saw Grant's truck screech to a stop at the curb. The door slammed hard enough to make the windows rattle, and before I could even ask what was wrong, he was taking the steps 2 at a time. His face was red, jaw tight, eyes locked on me like I was the only thing standing between him and salvation or destruction. "You've ruined everything," he spat, his voice shaking with a fury I didn't recognize. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but his hand came across my face so fast the sound cracked in my ears before the sting even hit. My head jerked to the side, my palm instinctively pressing to my cheek as the taste of copper spread in my mouth. Sierra appeared behind him, perfectly composed, her arms folded like she'd been expecting this moment. The smirk on her lips made my stomach turn. "Walking jinx," she said slowly, savoring each syllable. "Get out." The air seemed to thicken around me. Somewhere to my left, I registered the creak of a neighbor's screen door, the low murmur of someone whispering. But my focus was on Grant, my son closing the distance between us, his hand tangled in my hair, yanking so hard my scalp burned. "Grant." My voice caught as he pulled me forward, my feet scraping against the porch boards. He dragged me toward the edge, down the steps, and into the yard like I was some piece of furniture he'd decided no longer belonged. I caught flashes of faces, Mrs. Caldwell clutching her robe, the Henderson boys frozen on their bikes, but no one moved. The quiet was louder than any shouting could have been. When he stopped at the edge of the driveway, he let go so abruptly I stumbled, catching myself on the mailbox. My hair hung in my face, strands clinging to my lips. I pushed them back with shaking fingers and looked at him, searching for the boy I'd raised, the one I'd worked double shifts to feed, the one I'd stood in rainstorms waiting for after football practice. But he was gone. All that stood in front of me was a man with his wife's approval stamped across his smirk. Sierra's hand slid into his. Her nails painted the same crimson as the rage pounding in my ears. Without another word, they turned and walked back toward the truck. I stayed rooted in place, the cold air pressing against the heat in my cheek, my fingers curling into fists at my sides. By the time their tail lights disappeared, the shame had settled deep, but beneath it, something colder and sharper had already begun to take shape. After they drove away, I stayed outside, my breath clouding in the air, my cheek throbbing in time with my heartbeat. It would have been easy to believe this was a sudden storm, but storms build long before they break. When Grant was 7, his father collapsed on the factory floor. One moment, I was folding laundry. The next, I was standing in the emergency room, staring at a doctor whose lips were moving but whose words I couldn't hear. From then on, it was just the two of us. I worked mornings at the diner and nights cleaning offices, sometimes napping in my car between shifts so I could still be at his school plays. By high school, Grant had dreams bigger than our small town, and I was determined he'd have the chance. I sold the gold bracelet my mother had given me for my 18th birthday to pay for his college deposit. When tuition bills came due, I picked up catering gigs on weekends. I told him it was fine, that I liked keeping busy, even when my feet ached so badly I could barely climb the stairs at night. When he wanted to start his first business, a car detailing shop, I co-signed the loan. I didn't have the credit to spare. But he'd looked at me with the same eager eyes he'd had as a boy, and I couldn't say no. Then Sierra arrived. She had the kind of polished charm that looked like kindness until you listened closely. The first time we met, she brought a bouquet, told me she'd heard so much about me, and then added, "It must be hard living alone all these years." I told myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But over time, I saw the shifts. Grant calling less, plans falling through. His voice taking on her phrasing when he spoke to me clipped, assessing, as though I was an employee under review. She never raised her voice, never had to. The power was in the tilt of her head, the small sighs, the way Grant's shoulders would tense when she glanced his way. Looking back now, the betrayal feels less like a shock and more like a destination I'd been walking toward without realizing. I just didn't expect the road to end on my own front porch. Inside, the photos of us on the hallway wall seemed to watch me as I reached for the phone. I locked the door behind me and slid the deadbolt, my hands trembling harder than I wanted to admit. The quiet inside felt heavy, pressing against my ears, as if the whole house was holding its breath. I set the broom aside and went straight to the bathroom, under the harsh light. The damage was starker. My lip was split, the skin around it already beginning to swell, and a red bloom was spreading high on my cheekbone. I dabbed at it with a wet cloth, wincing when the sting sharpened. A few strands of hair, torn from my scalp, clung to my sweater. I pulled them free and laid them on the counter without thinking, each one a reminder of the grip he'd had on me. For years, I'd been told to keep the peace. Let it go, not make trouble. Tonight, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to disappear into silence again, not this time. I reached for my phone, opened the camera, and took photo after photo, my face from every angle. The hair, the porch where it had happened. I saved each one carefully, labeling them so I wouldn't forget the sequence. When the phone's screen dimmed, my reflection stared back at me in the black glass tired eyes, but steadier than they'd been a half hour ago. My thumb hovered over my contacts list until I found her name, Marina Holt. Years ago, Marina had been 3 days from eviction when I covered her rent without a second thought. We hadn't spoken much lately, but I knew she hadn't forgotten. The call rang twice before a groggy voice answered. Thick with sleep, Lorena. I swallowed, my throat tight. I need help. I don't know who else to call. There was a pause. Then her voice cleared, steady and direct. Tell me everything. I sat down on the edge of the bed, still clutching the phone, the words building in my chest. Marina didn't waste time on sympathy. You need protection, Lorena, tonight. And you need eyes on them before they realize you're not going to crawl away quietly. Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the fog still hanging over me. I thought of the one person who'd know how to dig without leaving footprints, Victor Ames, my neighbor across the street, a retired sheriff. He'd always had a quiet way of noticing things most people missed. I called him, my voice low. Victor, I need a favor. Name it, he said without hesitation. I need you to find out what Grant and Sierra have been doing with my accounts, my property, anything with my name on it. There was a pause on the line. The kind that means someone is weighing more than they're saying. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring whatever paperwork you have. 2 days later, he showed up at my door with a manila envelope under his arm and a look that told me I wasn't going to like what I was about to hear. We sat at my kitchen table, the blinds half drawn, coffee cooling between us. First thing, he said, sliding out a stack of printed documents. The cabin property you inherited from your uncle. The deed was transferred into Sierra's name last month. I stared at the paper. My own signature nowhere on it. Second, he continued, there have been withdrawals from an account tied to your savings regular ones. Large, all routed through a joint account you didn't open. I felt the air leave my lungs. And third, he said, tapping another sheet. Some of these transfers straight into an LLC Sierra registered 6 months ago. No business activity, just deposits. I looked at the neat columns of numbers. The digital footprints that didn't lie. My son and his wife weren't just cruel, they were thieves. Victor leaned back. This is enough to get law enforcement interested. Question is, how do you want to play it? I gathered the papers into a stack, pressing my palm flat on top of them, like I could keep the anger from spilling over. The text came early in the morning, short and practiced. We need to talk. Come by today. No apology, no explanation, just an order, as if nothing had happened on my porch days earlier. I went anyway, but not without preparation. Victor's envelope of evidence sat in my bag, and I'd rehearsed every word I would or wouldn't say. Sierra opened the door with that tight smile she used for social events, the one that never reached her eyes. "Lorena," she said sweetly, stepping aside. Their living room was magazine-perfect white furniture, gleaming floors, everything staged. In the center, on the glass coffee table, sat a neat stack of papers. Grant lounged in an armchair like a man doing me a favor. "Let's make this easy," he said, tapping the top page. "Sign. Take the payout. And we can all move on." I glanced down. Non-disclosure agreement. Waiver of claims. Legalese meant to erase not just what they'd done, but any chance of holding them accountable. As I straightened, something caught my eye, a phone on the side table, angled toward me. Its red recording light barely visible. They were baiting me, hoping I'd explode. Give them something to twist into proof of their innocence. I met Grant's eyes, then Sierra's, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them think I might take the bait. Then I smiled. "You've both thought this through," I said lightly, picking up the papers and flipping through them. "The payout's generous. Considering it's my own money you're offering." Grant's jaw twitched. Sierra's hand stilled on her knee. I set the papers back exactly where they'd been and leaned forward just enough to make sure my voice was steady and clear. "This was your one chance to walk away." Grant's smirk faltered. Sierra's smile slipped altogether. I stood, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked to the door without another word. The phone on the table kept recording, but all it would capture was the sound of my heels on their perfect floor and the click of the latch as I left. By the time I reached my car, the adrenaline had cooled into something sharper strategy. The diner was nearly empty when I walked in. The smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. Marina was already in a booth at the back, legal pad in front of her, pen tapping against the page. Victor sat opposite her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. I slid into the seat beside Marina and set the manila envelope on the table. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner was the only sound as I spread out the document's property deeds with Sierra's name on them. Bank statements showing withdrawals I'd never authorized. Account transfers into an LLC with no business activity. Marina scanned each page slowly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is clean," she murmured, meaning the evidence was solid. No one can spin these numbers. Victor reached under the table and pulled out a small USB drive, sliding it toward me. "Security camera from across the street," he said. "Clear view of your porch, captures the slap, the dragging, even her calling you a walking jinx." My fingers closed around it. "How did you neighbors trust me?" he said simply. "And I know who actually checks their footage." Marina leaned back, eyes moving between us. "We have the assault. We have the financial theft. What we need now is reach. Someone who can put this in front of the right people before they can bury it." A name came to mind immediately. Evelyn Cruz. 10 years ago, she was an intern at the local paper, desperate for a lead that would keep her from being sent back to covering bake sales. I'd given her one, and it landed her front page bylines. She owed me, I know who. I said, "And she'll listen." Marina's pen stopped tapping. Then we move on, 3 fronts: legal, financial, public. All timed so they can't cut us off at any angle. Victor nodded. They'll come at you harder once this starts. I looked down at the spread of papers. The USB drive, the list already forming in Marina's neat handwriting. Harder didn't scare me anymore. We start now, I said, and began gathering the pieces. Evelyn picked up on the first ring. Lorena Voss, she said, the faint hum of a newsroom in the background. It's been a long time. I have a story for you, I replied. But you can't use my name. Not yet. There was a pause, then a shift in her tone alert. Ready. Send me what you've got. Within the hour. I was sitting in her office, the manila envelope open between us. She took her time with each page, her expression hardening as she moved from the bank statements to the property deeds. When I slid the USB drive across the desk, she raised an eyebrow. It's all there. I said, the slap. Sierra's words, him dragging me down the steps. Evelyn plugged it in, the screen filling with high-definition footage. The audio was crisp, every insult and gasp from the neighbors clear. She didn't flinch as she watched. But when it ended, she closed the laptop slowly. This runs, she said. But your name stays off it until your lawyer says otherwise. Marina was already ahead of us. The same afternoon, she filed an emergency motion to freeze any assets tied to my accounts. If we don't stop the bleeding, she told me over the phone, there won't be anything left to fight for by the next morning. Victor had confirmed the freeze was in place. They'll feel it, he said. A hint of satisfaction in his voice. Sierra won't be able to use that LLC like a personal ATM anymore, for the first time since that night on my porch. I felt the ground shift under my feet, but not in the way it had before. This time, it tilted in my favor. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, the papers stacked neatly to one side, my coffee cooling in front of me. The footage was backed up in 3 different places. The legal process was moving, and the journalist who owed me was ready to strike when I gave the word. They thought they'd backed me into a corner. All they'd really done was give me the perfect place to aim. The first sign came in the form of a text from an old co-worker. Saw the video. What happened to you? I clicked the link and felt my stomach drop. It was the security footage, but not the version Victor had given me. In this edit, Grant's slap was gone. Sierra's insult was muted. Instead, there were clipped fragments of me after the assault. My voice raised, my movements jerky. They'd turned me into the aggressor. By midday, the video was everywhere. Comments flooded my social media unstable. Attention seeker, must be after money. Some were from strangers. Others were from neighbors I'd waved to for years. Each one felt like a fresh slap. Then came the email from Marina. They've filed a defamation suit. We'll talk tonight, when she arrived. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The printed comments spread out like evidence of some invisible crime. They're making people believe it, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Marina dropped her bag on the floor and pulled up a chair. It's noise, she said. Loud, ugly noise, but it's not truth. We have the unedited footage, the financial records, and a witness who's ready to talk if needed. They want you shaken before we hit. Don't give them that. I tried to focus on her words. But the image of Mrs. Caldwell, my neighbor for 20 years, posting a comment that read, I guess we never really know people, kept flashing in my mind. Marina reached across the table, tapping the pile of papers. If they want war, they picked the wrong opponent. Her certainty was like a weight settling in my chest, anchoring me. I pushed the comments aside, replaced them with the neatly labeled folders holding every piece of evidence we'd gathered. They wanted my silence. I said, they're about to hear me loud and clear. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and coffee gone cold. I sat at the defendant's table beside Marina, my hands folded on my lap, trying to keep them still. Across from us, Grant wore a suit that didn't quite fit. His tie crooked. Sierra sat next to him, spine straight, lips pressed into a perfect line. Their attorney started strong, painting them as victims of a malicious campaign designed to damage their reputations. He called the edited video a true representation and described me as emotionally unstable and vindictive. When he finally sat down, Marina rose. Calm and deliberate, Your Honor, she began. This case hinges on truth. And the truth is documented, recorded, and corroborated. She called Victor to the stand first. His testimony was clear. He'd retrieved the original security footage, verified its authenticity, and preserved the chain of custody. The judge nodded as Marina introduced the USB drive. The screen flickered to life, and the room went silent. The slap was unmistakable, the sound sharp in the hushed space. Sierra's voice, clear and cold, walking jinx. Get out. Then Grant's hand in my hair, dragging me down the steps, the shocked gasps of neighbors in the background. Gasps echoed again, this time from the gallery. I saw a reporter's pen freeze mid-sentence. Grant shifted in his chair, his earlier smirk gone. Sierra's face lost its color, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. Marina didn't let the silence linger. She moved to the financial evidence property deed signed without my consent. Bank transfers to Sierra's LLC, withdrawals from my accounts. Each document appeared on the screen, dates and amounts highlighted in red. These, Marina said, her voice cutting through the room, are not the actions of victims. They are the calculated moves of individuals who exploited a family member for personal gain, then sought to silence her through deception. The judge leaned forward. Are you prepared to substantiate these claims? Marina held his gaze. We are. Your Honor, after a moment. The judge announced the fraud investigation would proceed and ordered the asset transfers unsealed. The hum of whispers rose immediately, reporters scribbling furiously. I sat back, the weight in my chest easing for the first time in weeks, and fixed my eyes on the only door that mattered now, the one leading out to the waiting microphones. By the time I stepped outside the courthouse, the story was already everywhere. News sites ran the footage alongside headlines about fraud investigations and family betrayal. Clips spread across social media, stripped of context but impossible to misinterpret. Grant's employer issued a bland statement about upholding company values before announcing his termination. Sierra's family released one of their own, carefully worded, but unmistakably cutting her off. Within a week, their house appeared on the real estate listings, photos of empty rooms staged to hide the desperation behind the sale. I didn't gloat, not publicly. The victory wasn't in watching them fall, it was in knowing they couldn't reach me anymore. Back home, the porch still bore faint scuffs from the soles of my shoes that night. I sanded them down myself, then laid fresh paint over the boards. Victor came by with a set of iron gates he'd salvaged from a property years ago. Together, we set them into the posts at the top of the steps, the latch solid and sure in my hand. Inside, I cleared a drawer in my desk for the flash drive. The video sat there, labeled in black marker, tucked between manila folders and a sealed envelope of my will. Not as a weapon waiting to be used, but as a reminder of the line I'd drawn and crossed. When I had to. The phone rang less. Neighbors waved a little too enthusiastically, as if to make up for the days they'd looked away. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't need them. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch behind the new gate, coffee in hand, listening to the street settle into its quiet rhythm. The air felt different, now lighter, but edged with the knowledge of what it had taken to get here. Some nights, I'd reach into that desk drawer, run my fingers over the cold metal of the drive, and close it again without opening the file. I didn't have to see it to remember. I carried the truth with me now, and that was enough. The gate stayed closed, and for the first time in years, so did the door.